911, what's your emergency? Silence. At first, I assumed it was a butt dial. Happens more than you'd think, especially from older phones. Still, policy says we stay on the line and listen, just in case. I turned up the volume and leaned in. There was a sound, but nothing clear. Just static, maybe wind, a faint rustling, almost like someone shifting on gravel or dragging something across it. And then I heard something that made my skin prickle. A breath. Very faint, not even close to the mic, but human. Sharp and shaky, like it hurt to breathe, but as though it were being suppressed. I spoke again. Hello, can you speak? Can you press a key or make any kind of sound if you need help? Still nothing. I should have written it off, but something in that breath felt wrong, like someone was trying to stay quiet. Then, out of the static, barely above a whisper, help me. My heart rate kicked up. I sat up straight, keyed in a manual trace, and flagged it as high priority unknown. Her voice was distant, muffled, like she wasn't speaking into the phone but near it, like the phone was on speaker, or she was talking through fabric. Duct tape maybe, a blanket, a trunk. Ma'am, I hear you, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Can you tell me where you are? Just one word, anything. She didn't reply, just another breath, then a thump. It was distant, but I caught it. Something heavy hitting metal maybe. Then a dragging sound again, and then nothing. We initiated GPS tracking. The ping came back with about 150-meter radius. Not exact, but enough. It placed her somewhere near the Pine Loop Trail, just outside of city limits. It is a popular hiking area, though not so much at night. No houses out there, just forest and dirt road access. I radioed the nearest unit and got them en route. ETA 12 minutes. Back on the line, I listened. The call had been open for almost 5 minutes. That's when I heard the second voice. No distinguishable words, just the unmistakable sound of a man breathing, close to the receiver. I nearly dropped the headset. Ma'am, I said, trying not to raise my voice. You're not alone. Is someone there with you? Can you make a sound if you're in danger? Another thump. Then a soft metallic creak, like a hinge, a car door. The woman whispered again, barely audible. He's coming. Then rapid rustling. Her breathing sped up, then stopped altogether, and the line went dead. For a second, I sat there frozen, hand hovering over the keyboard. I felt sick. Every instinct in me was screaming. She was in a trunk. That sound, the dragging, the door creaking, the distance of her voice, it all lined up. Units arrived at the trailhead less than 5 minutes later. The area was pitch black. No vehicles in sight. Just tire tracks in dirt. Fresh ones. Deep. Like someone had pulled in fast, backed up, and taken off in a hurry. K9 units were called in. They searched the perimeter. Nothing. We pulled traffic cam footage from the nearest intersection about 2 miles out. Just one car passed through around 2:39 a.m. A dark, late 90s sedan. No plates visible. No match in the system. Then, at 4:51 a.m., a man called in to report his car stolen. Said he'd left it in a parking lot overnight while staying at a friend's house. Claimed he came back to grab something and it was gone. Make and model. A dark green 1997 Toyota Camry. Bingo. We flagged it, and 3 hours later, Highway Patrol found the vehicle dumped behind an abandoned rest stop, nearly 60 miles away. It had been wiped clean, mostly. No fingerprints, no personal belongings. But there were signs someone had been in the trunk. Blood. Not much, but enough to swab. Blonde hair. a torn fingernail stuck in the lining. They never found the woman. The blood sample never matched anyone in the system. No missing persons reports in the area that matched her voice or description. But the phone she used to call us, it was an old prepaid burner, unregistered, purchased in cash from a gas station 2 towns over. Security footage wasn't at the right angle to get an ID. And that call, 17 minutes and 42 seconds, that's how long I sat there, listening to that poor woman's cry for help, desperately wanting to help her, but unable to do enough. And the last thing on the recording, not words, not even a voice. 3 slow, metallic knocks. Then 1 last breath. Then silence. Sometimes when the phones go quiet at night, I still think about her. How she stayed calm, how she never screamed, and how she made sure the line stayed open long enough for someone to know she was real, even if no one ever found her. I used to think the creepiest calls were the ones with screaming. Now I know the quiet ones are worse. It was a Friday night. I was 4 hours into a 12-hour shift at the dispatch center, flipping between monitoring channels and sipping flat vending machine cola. A call came through from a payphone. Yeah, an actual payphone. That alone was weird. Caller ID said, unknown, but the system flagged the number as a landline, one of the few public phones still active in the area. The voice that came through was small, shaky. Hi, I can't find my mom. I straightened in my chair. It sounded like a girl, maybe 6, 7 years old. You could hear the fear in her voice, but she wasn't crying, just scared. Sweetheart, I said gently, switching to my child voice tone. What's your name? A pause. Ashley, she said. Okay, Ashley, are you safe right now? Can you tell me where you are? She hesitated again. I'm at a gas station. I think it's closed. I asked her to describe it. Any signs, anything nearby? She didn't know. She said her mom went inside to get something, and then she never came back out. That didn't sit right. I asked how long she'd been waiting. She said it had gotten dark twice. She was hungry, cold. That was the first moment I felt the chill. Ashley, how long ago did your mom go inside? Another long pause. A long time ago. The man said she was gone and he put me in his car. And he dropped me here. I froze. This wasn't a lost child. This was a possible abduction. Maybe 2. I flagged the call for emergency response and looped in our supervisor. We started scanning for nearby stations with payphones, and there were only 3 in the whole county. Units were dispatched to all 3. Back on the line, I asked Ashley if she could see any cars, any lights, anything that might help us find her. There's a truck with a horse on it, she said, painted on the side. That was our first real lead. One of the payphones was next to an old rest stop gas station near Highway 12, known for an old mural of a cowboy and horse on the wall. We routed units to it immediately. ETA, 9 minutes. I stayed on the line. I didn't want her to feel alone. Can you see anything else, Ashley? She was quiet, then whispered, There's a man here now. Every hair on my body stood up. Ashley, don't talk, just listen to me. Is he talking to you? I heard her breathing, fast, shallow. She didn't answer. Then came a second voice, muffled, low. I couldn't make it out. It wasn't yelling, but it wasn't friendly either. It sounded like he was trying to coax her. And then The line just clicked. Disconnected. Units pulled up to the rest stop 3 minutes later. They found the phone still swinging slightly on its metal cord, but no child, no man, no vehicle. The attendant said the gas station had been closed for over a year. No security cameras, no recent visitors, just the phone. We ran a search on the number she called from. It was registered as inactive. The payphone had been disconnected for 6 months. We pulled tapes from nearby highway cams, hoping to get lucky. One unit caught partial footage from earlier that night, a grainy, time-stamped clip showing a small girl walking barefoot across the lot. And about 30 seconds later, a tall man, dark hoodie, slumped posture, follows behind her. Then the footage cuts out. Glitch, maybe, but it just stops. Mid-frame. The girl never turned around. We never found her. No missing persons reports that matched the name Ashley. No recent kidnappings with that description. No known vehicles or suspects. It was like she'd never existed. Except I heard her. She called for help from a dead line at a closed station, and then she was gone. The next night, I stayed late and played the call again, headphones on, volume maxed. I don't know why. Maybe I thought I missed something. And right before the call cuts out, right before that last click, I swear I hear her whisper, "He said you'd be listening." You tell me what that means, because I haven't slept right since. You get desensitized a lot working 911. Panic becomes background noise. Screams stop shocking you. Even silence doesn't always mean danger. Sometimes it just means bad reception or an accidental call. But every so often, the call cuts through the routine. It doesn't matter how experienced you are. Something about it grabs hold of you. It lingers. This call, this one stuck with me for years. And it didn't even start with screaming. It started with a man saying something so ordinary, so quietly, I almost missed how wrong it was. He said, "I think someone's living in my basement." It was 1:12 a.m. on a Wednesday in early spring. I remember because the weather had just started warming up, and I had the windows cracked in the call center, rare for that time of night. The caller was calm, not out of breath, not panicking, just flat, like he wasn't sure if he was losing his mind or not. I asked for his name and address. He gave both without hesitation. Henry P., 68 years old, lived alone in a one-story farmhouse on the outskirts of town. No known history of mental illness, no prior calls from that address. "Tell me what's going on," I asked. He paused. "There's been noise down there, in the basement. Not rats, not pipes, not the furnace, something else. Dragging sounds and whispering." "Whispering?" I questioned. "Yes," he replied, "like someone talking to themselves, low, just under the floorboards." I'll be honest, at first, I thought it might be a wellness check situation. Maybe he was confused. Maybe he had early-stage dementia. But there was nothing in his tone that suggested he didn't believe every word he was saying. He wasn't guessing. He was reporting. I asked the usual questions. If the doors were locked, if he'd gone down to check, if he could safely leave the house. "I haven't gone down there in 2 weeks, he said. "I don't go down there at all anymore." "Why not?" I asked. "Because the last time I did," he said slowly, "I saw someone's foot pull back into the shadows. Bare, pale. They didn't run, just backed away." I remember going cold. He said it so plainly, no exaggeration. I dispatched officers immediately and stayed on the line with him. Response time to his area was longer than usual, nearly 15 minutes. I asked if he could move to a safe place, maybe lock the door to the basement. I tried locking it, he said, but it doesn't stay locked anymore. Door keeps creaking open on its own. At that exact moment, I heard it through the phone. Creak. Long and slow, wood on wood. Then, silence. Mr. P, I said carefully, what just happened? He didn't answer right away. Then very quietly, he said, the door just opened again. I asked him to move to another room. He said he was already in his recliner, shotgun across his lap, eyes on the dark hallway. He hadn't moved in over an hour, just listening, waiting. Can you still hear anything? I asked. He said no, not anymore, but he could feel something there, like pressure behind the walls. Then he said, I think whoever it is, I think they've been watching me longer than I realized. I asked him what made him say that. He said he'd started noticing small things missing around the house. Items moved, food from the pantry, dirty water in the upstairs bathroom sink, even though he hadn't used it in days, scratches on the inside of a closet door, muddy prints that didn't match his boots. That's when I started to believe him fully. It wasn't paranoia. It was a pattern. Officers arrived minutes later. I told Henry to stay on the line until they entered. He just said, okay, I'm not moving anyway. Then I heard it. Not through the phone, through the radio feed from one of the officers on scene. Basement doors open, entering now. There was a long pause, footsteps, muffled voices. Then, we've got a concealed crawl space behind some shelving. It's been broken into. The next update made my skin crawl. Inside the crawl space, they found old food wrappers, a water bottle, and an old sleeping bag, moldy, half torn. There were long strands of hair caught in the wall insulation and scratched into the drywall with a nail or knife, were the words, "Don't turn around." No one was found in the crawl space. No fingerprints matched anyone in the system. No DNA hits. Whoever had been living there was gone. Left within hours, maybe minutes before the police arrived. But here's the part I've never forgotten. The officers dusted the inside of the basement door, the side facing the basement, and they found greasy handprints, dozens of them, smudged low, like someone had been pressing their palms to the door for days, maybe weeks, listening. Henry moved out within the week. He didn't sell the house, didn't clean it, just packed a suitcase and left. When he called us to cancel the follow-up visit, he said, I don't care if they find out who it was. I'm not going back. That place isn't mine anymore. I asked him why he felt that way. He said something I still think about sometimes. They weren't trying to hurt me. They were trying to replace me. Slowly. 6 months later, a neighbor reported lights on in the house again. Someone walking in front of the windows at night. But when deputies checked it out, the house was still abandoned. No utilities connected. No footprints outside. Just one thing left on the wall near the basement door. A single handprint pressed into the dust. Child-sized. So, I've been a career paramedic, but this happened when I'd only been one for 5 years. This has never left me to this day, and I shit you not. It happened exactly like this. I was driving home on a rural highway one rainy afternoon. It was really pouring, and traffic had slowed to about 50 miles per hour. I was following two vehicles, and we rounded a bend in the road as a small sports car on the opposite side crossed the center line and hit the small SUV that was leading the three of us vehicles on my side of the road. I immediately pulled over and called 911. It was a bad one. I got out to check on everyone. There was wailing coming from the SUV on the side of the road. That's always a good thing because people are breathing. So I went down into the field past the ditch to check on the sports car. There were two young guys in the car. The force of the impact had driven the engine to where the front passenger seat should be. The passenger seat was still buckled, his crumpled hand grabbing the "oh shit" handle overhead. The entire section of car shoved into the back seat area. The back of the car had peeled away, as had the passenger's top of his head. His jawbone jutted out, raw and jagged. He was clearly deceased, but I felt for a pulse anyway, all while listening to the gasping, ragged, dragging breaths of the driver. No pulse on the passenger. I tried to figure out how to deal with the driver, but there was nothing I could do. The car had literally wrapped around him, and it would take an extraction team to get him out. Listening to his dying breathing, I apologized out loud that I couldn't do more, told him I was sorry to leave him, but others needed my help too. In my heart, I knew he'd never make it. So I went to render aid where it was needed. In triage, we call this black tagging a patient who isn't going to survive. I did what I could for the family in the SUV. Emergency medical people and fire services got to the scene and took over. The entire family had injuries, but all survived. The mother had permanent brain damage and lost an eye. But the whole day, those two guys in the red sports car stayed on my mind. That night, I was home alone and getting ready for bed with just the bedside lamp on, and I heard something in the hallway. It got louder as it came closer down the dark hallway toward my open door. It was like a thump, drag, thump, drag. I absolutely froze. A broken hand curled around the frame of my doorway, and then that kid from the passenger seat was standing there, busted up just like he was in the car. I'm totally serious. He looked at me, and I can't recall the exact words of what he said, but it was something along the lines of, "Hey, my friend wants you to know he understands. He wants you to know he's okay. We both are. Thanks for trying." He stood there for a few more seconds, just looking at me, and then he stepped back into the shadows, let go of the door frame, and I listened to him drag back down the hallway into nothing. I turned on every damn light I could. I slept with the lights on for 2 full weeks. I clipped out their death notices from the paper later that week. Turns out, they were both high school seniors, on their way home from a wrestling tournament. Their car hydroplaned, from what the investigation determined. I'd never have recognized the blonde-headed kid had he come to me as his healthy, unwrecked self. It freaked me the hell out that he came to me busted up. I still have the newspaper clippings. I'll never forget them. Nor the ghostly visit. Anyway, that's my experience. I've seen a lot of shit in my 29-year career, but nothing quite that visceral before nor since. I am and have been a paramedic for about 10 years. My entire career has been spent in emergency medicine, responding to 911 calls, and providing advanced life support for life-threatening illnesses and injuries. The calls we respond to range from inappropriate use of an ambulance to minutes away from death, and oftentimes, it's already too late. This story in particular is going to be dark. I apologize in advance if there are people that read this story and are affected by the nature of it. It is going to be graphic. I'm not going to gloss over any details because the imagery is important. As awful as this story is, I want to make something good come from it. I want to use this story to preach a bit and hope it finds someone, somewhere, and helps them. As stated, this content may not be suitable for everyone, but again, I believe it to be important. It is gonna be a long one, so set in, get comfortable, get a blanket or something warm to wrap yourself in. This is the one and only story I have a hard time sharing, and you will find out why. With all that out of the way, this story is my Vietnam. I've been working for a couple of years as a paramedic after I graduated from school. The place I worked primarily was in the city, but our service area was the entire county, which is very rural. When you're in school, you go on ride-alongs. You practice your skills with preceptors on patients, very similar to residency or internship. Your exposure to the job is what you get while on those ride-alongs. Sometimes you get seriously injured patients, and it's terrifying, because you sometimes don't always know what to do. You're still learning, but you have your preceptor at your back to protect you from any fuck-ups and guide you. Sometimes, though, you don't get lucky enough to experience some of these horrible things. To some, that may seem like a good thing, but it is important to experience these as it prepares you for a time when you're all alone. There are a couple of terms we use, called white cloud and black cloud. White cloud refers to a person, either student or professional, who never gets the exciting serious calls. The calls always seem to come when you're just getting off shift, or you left the area of where the call came in, and now another ambulance takes it. And this white cloud can follow this person for any length of time. Black cloud is the opposite. When I was in school, I was a white cloud. I got a few cardiac arrests, bad accidents, things like that, but nothing that ever really stood out as unique. So, a couple years into my career, this white cloud is still kind of hanging over me. That's not to say I hadn't had any bad calls before that. I have, but it's not the same. The day this story takes place is Christmas Eve. I worked from 7 a.m. Christmas Eve to 7 a.m. Christmas Day. From what I remember, the day was pretty slow. Most people are with their families, not going outside, getting into car accidents or causing mischief. I was working with a charge medic at the time, and a brand new EMT who was going through his FTO, field orientation process, was with us. A few of my co-workers had made a Christmas dinner that day, so we all had hot food to enjoy while we had to work and be away from our families. At our station, we had 2 ambulances there, with 2 crews. Myself, my partner, and our FTO, and the other crew. When night comes, if a call comes into our station, the 2 crews just rotate calls so that we get to sleep a bit more. It was around 11 p.m., and as I was sitting in the recliner watching TV, a call came into our station that required us to respond out to the county. One of the guys on the other crew, who was a friend of mine, was asleep in the recliner next to me, so I took the call. The call was initially for a woman who had fallen and hit her head but was conscious and breathing. Due to the nature of the injury, we responded emergent. It was probably about a 15-minute drive to get to the person's house. As we're getting close, dispatch informs us now the PT is not conscious but breathing. As we approach the residence, driving down the street where this little development is, there are flashing lights everywhere. Sheriff's deputies, police, fire department were all there, with some even blocking the entrance to the street. For just a simple head injury, we thought that was pretty weird, and it set a weird vibe for the call. One of the deputies saw us coming and moved his car, allowing us through. Once we got through, this part of the street ended in a cul-de-sac with houses all around it. People were standing on their front porches looking at what was going on. We arrived at the address. There is a vehicle parked in the driveway, still running with officers all around. The driver's side door was open, and there was an officer standing there and looking like he was talking to someone sitting in the driver's seat. I walked up first with my partner and our EMT FTO behind me. As I approach the rear of the vehicle, I see there's definitely someone sitting inside. There is also a man, middle-aged, in plain clothes, standing in front of the vehicles, his lower half lit up by the headlights. He has his hands in his pockets, and he's looking rather intently at the person in the vehicle. I walk up to the officer and get a report from him. While the officer is telling me what's going on, I look at the person in the driver's seat. The person sitting in the driver's seat was a middle-aged woman, maybe mid-40s or 50s, sitting back with her head against the headrest, her arms hanging down by her side. I can visibly see her breathing, hear her moaning, but there was no talking. Her eyes are also closed. There is a bit of blood running down from her head, past her cheeks and down to her chin. There is also a small stream of blood coming from her nose. The officer tells me that she was inside with the family when she came outside to get something from the car. The officer says that the woman's husband, and gestures to the man standing in front of the car, came out to check on her because she was out here for a while. When the husband saw his wife bleeding, he figured she must have fallen or hit her head on something. So he called 911. The officer tells me the woman has not been responding to him. I attempt to speak to the woman. She does not answer me, but continues to moan. I perform a sternum rub to cause painful stimuli and hope to get some sort of reaction. No reaction. I ask the husband if she has been drinking tonight or if she abuses any drugs that he knows of. He says that she's had a few glasses of wine, but no drug use. At this point, I'm thinking she has a head injury and potentially a brain bleed because she's not responding appropriately. I stand where the officer was standing in the driver's side door as I'm performing my assessment. I can't see where the blood is coming from, so I figure she has a laceration or something in her hair that isn't visible. It's at this time that the officer comes up to me. He says, "We also found this in the driver's side door compartment." He produces a revolver. I look at the officer and look at the revolver. He looks at me and holds it out. I grab the revolver and flip out the cylinder, and at the same time thinking to myself, oh fuck. In the cylinder is one brass casing with the primer indented, meaning a round has been fired. With this new information, and based on the bleeding, I assume the PT had put the gun to her temple or something. The fact that she's still breathing and making noises leads me to assume that she missed, or the bullet miraculously bounced off if she held it at a weird angle. Due to the potential for significant head trauma, I decide that we need to place a cervical collar on the woman in case of spinal injury as well. I ask one of the firefighters to grab a collar out of our ambulance. I open the back door of the vehicle and get in behind the woman so I can hold her head stable while the fireman places the collar on. It's only when I do this that I see what really is going on. As I slide in behind the PT, I can see the back of her head, something I will never be able to unsee. Looking at the back of her head, I see a grapefruit-sized hole. With my flashlight, I look at the hole, and it is almost empty, except for a large piece of skull that is floating on top of a blood and brain soup. I look up, and on the headliner of the vehicle is a 2-foot in diameter halo of blood and brain painted above her, with tiny pieces of skull stuck into the fabric. I look back at the hole. It is a chilly night, so I can see heat vapors coming out of the hole, similar to how you would be able to see your breath on a cold day. I look out of the vehicle to my partner and I say, "We need to go, now." Either the look on my face or his sense caused him to peek inside the vehicle and see what I was seeing. His eyes grew wide, and all he said was, "Holy shit." Our EMT FTO quickly went to the ambulance and grabbed the stretcher and backboard. Up until this point, we were taking our time carefully getting her out of the vehicle, but now, carefully and slowly turned into just get her out of the vehicle. Our EMT also grabbed me a few large trauma dressings and gauze wrap. I placed the trauma dressing over the hole and wrapped the ever-living shit out of it around her head so that when we moved her onto the stretcher, nothing would spill out. With the help of the fire department and police, we moved the woman onto the backboard and put her on the stretcher. The whole time, the husband has been standing at the front of the vehicle, watching, not understanding what was happening. As we get the woman on the stretcher, he comes over, and I can see he now has tears on his face. He bends down, kisses her on the cheek and says, "I love you." We quickly get the woman in the ambulance. Due to the woman's injury, her cerebrum, the largest part of the brain, is almost completely gone, meaning she has no motor function, no muscle tone, and no cognitive abilities. Her brainstem, however, is still intact. The bullet missed it. The brainstem controls the body's automatic functions, like respiratory rate, heart rate, and blood pressure. Due to this, when we moved the woman to the stretcher, her tongue fell against the back of her oral airway, causing a blockage. I knew immediately this was going to happen, so I had my partner set up the intubation supplies for me. In the ambulance, I placed the laryngoscope, a bladed device used in intubation, into the patient's mouth to move her jaw and tongue forward, opening her airway. I see the hole on the roof of the woman's mouth. I slide the endotracheal tube through the woman's vocal cords into her trachea. This gives us a secured airway so we can ventilate the patient. My partner uses an intraosseous needle to obtain vascular access. It does the same thing as an IV, but it goes into the bone, and medication and fluids are absorbed by the bone marrow. I place the PT on the cardiac monitor, check her blood pressure and oxygen. At the time, I thought it was the strangest thing. Her blood pressure was actually good. Her heart rate was normal. Her oxygen was good, and her cardiac rhythm was normal. We start transporting Emergent to the hospital, and I give them a heads up activating the trauma team. After the call, we went back to the station to restock the ambulance and clean up. That's when I saw all the bits of bone and blood on my pants and shirt. Luckily, the charge medic let me go home and take a shower and put on a new pair of clothes. After I changed, I went back to work, and the rest of the shift was uneventful. I learned that the next morning, around 9 a.m., the family had decided to remove life support, and the woman passed away. For many years after that call, I didn't notice a change. I kept doing what I do best and never really thought I'd been affected by it, until I realized I was. A couple of years ago, I had a bad relationship that made me start thinking about myself and how I am. It was something that was always there, but I never really thought anything about it. I just thought it was my personality and who I developed into as an adult. I realized how angry I always was. I was not a mean person, but very simple stupid things would set me off, and I had a bad temper. I was very cynical of the world, still am, and what I thought was a stomach problem, I started thinking maybe it's anxiety. I decided that I want to figure out what caused me to be this way. I wanted to figure out why I think the way I do, why I act the way I do. So, I decided to go see a psychologist. After many months and visits, my psychologist came up with a PTSD diagnosis. I hated it at the time. I hated being categorized as someone with PTSD. It didn't make sense. I can handle anything. Nothing bothers me. But during those visits, as we conversed, the one thing that kept coming up was that call. I didn't realize how much it affected me, how much of a wall that I built to shut everyone out and not see who I really am, to protect myself. The more I thought about it, the more I came to realize that it probably makes sense. The reason I tell this story the way I do, with the graphic detail, is because I think everyone needs to understand it in its entirety. How mental health not only affects a single person, but everyone around them. Like I said, I'm going to get peachy, so if you don't want to read past this, I understand, but I urge you to. This is something we talk about at work quite a lot, and there are several co-workers on the ambulance even now that I talk with about this stuff. One of the, if not number one cause of death in first responders, is suicide. If you are someone who has thought about or attempted suicide in the past, you need to know that taking your life doesn't affect only you. You may think it will be better this way, but I assure you, it will not. People often say how selfish suicide is, and it's true, because once you are gone, you have no idea of the amount of lives that have been impacted by you. If you don't think this is true, or that no one will care, maybe you need to go back and reread my story, because I guarantee people care. I care. So find someone, anyone to just talk to. Be honest. Let them know how you're feeling. I know it's hard. It was hard for me, but it does get better. You just have to try. So if anyone you know has or does struggle with mental health issues, reach out. Just be an ear. You don't have to try and solve the problem, but just listen. If you listen, you just may hear something that can help save someone's life. And if you struggle with mental health issues and think there is no one for you to talk to, you're wrong. It can be a professional. It can be the person you consider a close friend or relative. If you feel like none of these options work for you, or that you're considering doing something dangerous, go to your local emergency room. Call 911, because that is what we are all here for. Police, fire, EMS, ER staff. People may not think of these people to call when you're having a mental emergency, but I can tell you firsthand that we deal with this a lot more than you think. And we are trained in how to deal with people in these situations. All of us, even if you don't know what to say, if you even just make the call, it will get things started, and hopefully you find the help you deserve. You can call the National Suicide Hotline from anywhere, at any time. They're available for anyone in suicidal crisis or emotional distress. There is always someone to talk to. Thank you all very much for reading and the support you have shown to me and my stories. I love you all. This happened a few years ago, but still freaks me out when I think about how differently it could have turned out. My husband, baby, and I used to live in the not-so-greatest apartment complex. There were 3 sections of the complex, with a total of 6 apartments, 3 on top and 3 on bottom, and 2 different buildings with each section. I lived in the upper-level middle apartment of the second building in the second section. I got along with my neighbors fine. We actually all moved into our apartments within a few weeks of each other. To my left is a woman called Barb, in her 50s, and she lives alone. Barb is a drinker and a big participant of any substances that make her feel good. She has a rotation of man friends that come and go. All fine by me. She gives me no issue, so I don't really give a fuck about what she does, but it needs to be mentioned for story purposes. I already mentioned that these weren't the best apartments. They were income-based, old and cheap. I'm pretty sure the walls were insulated with newspaper, if they had any insulation at all. So you could hear basically everything from both surrounding apartments, and a lot from the units below. The only time it really became an issue is during nap time and nighttime, when something would either prevent my 1-year-old from sleeping or wake him up. It didn't happen often. And when it did, I was always able to go knock on the noise culprit's door and handle it with no issues. Since my child was still a baby and I was constantly exhausted, 90% of the time his bedtime was my bedtime. Our bedrooms were on the opposite end of the apartment from the living room / kitchen / balcony / Barb's apartment. We also slept with both a noise machine and a fan to drown out any noise disturbances during the night. This particular night, though, my husband was off work, and we decided to watch a movie. There was a party going on in the first building of our section. Barb was friends with the party throwers, and we could hear her in and out of her apartment door several times, as well as all party people who were outside smoking. At some point during the movie, I fell asleep using my husband's lap as a pillow. Around 2 a.m., loud laughing from Barb's apartment wakes me up. I get up to pee and brush my teeth before coming back to kiss my husband goodnight and get into bed. I do my business and make my way back up the hall to the living room from the bathroom to tell my husband goodnight. I hear knocking on Barb's door, followed with what sounds like her door exploding off its hinges and flying into the wall that separates her apartment and ours. My husband and I both say, "What the fuck?" at the same time, and kind of just freeze. We hear Barb and a man talking, and it sounded like normal talking. They weren't yelling or anything, so we chalk it up to Barb and her guest having a little too much fun at the party and shrug it off. I get into bed and quickly go back to sleep. No more than 10 minutes after getting into bed, I wake up to what sounds like heavy furniture being body slammed, coming from Barb's apartment. Irked as hell from the second slumber disturbance, and knowing this is going to wake my kid up, I make my way back to the living room, planning to put my slippers on and knock on Barb's door and kindly ask her to shut the fuck up. I first walk out onto my balcony to smoke a cigarette, while hoping she realizes how loud whatever she's got going on is, and fix it without being asked. The body-slamming furniture only gets even louder while on the balcony, so I assume they've worked their way through her apartment and are body-slamming her bedroom furniture now. Even more irritated now, I decide Barb's too blitzed to realize how loud she's being, and I'm gonna have to go remind her that none of us are deaf in my apartment, so she was going to have to move her furniture fight somewhere else, or reschedule for normal furniture fighting hours, which are obviously during the day. I stand up and take a few steps toward Barb's bedroom window, where our small bucket for cigarette butts sits on the ledge of my balcony. Her bedroom window and the closest edge of my balcony to her window are only inches apart. She could easily crawl out of her window and onto my balcony or vice versa. And that's when I hear it. Muffled screams, like someone is holding a hand over a mouth, and a man's voice say in a very low voice, "If you don't shut the fuck up, I'm going to kill you." Oh shit, is my first thought. I fly inside the sliding door from my balcony and grab my phone to call 911 while telling my husband Barb is in trouble. He goes out and bangs on her door. Nobody comes, and it's locked because he tried the door handle after not being answered. I'm standing between the living room and the kitchen on the phone with 911. My husband walks outside and leans over to see if he can see anything through Barb's windows. The blinds are closed, but a couple of the blind slats are broken, leaving a small crack big enough for my husband to see someone laying on the floor halfway in her bedroom and halfway into her bathroom, and another person standing over them. He tells me, and I relay it to the 911 operator, while also adding, if the police aren't here soon, we are going to bust the door down ourselves. She calmly asks me not to do anything like that, to stay on the line, and that the police were en route and would be arriving soon. About 2 minutes later, we hear several pairs of boots coming up the apartment stairs to get to the second level that our apartments are on, and then loud pounding with, "Police, open up." I crack my front door to peek out and tell them we can still see 2 people in the back bedroom of Barb's apartment. There are 4 uniformed police officers with their guns drawn, and the one standing in front of my door tells me to get back inside and lock the door. Yes, sir. I go back inside and stand right inside my balcony door to watch for anything, like Barb trying to escape the man, or the man trying to escape the cops. I hear another round of police pounding at Barb's door going unanswered, and then the sound of the door being kicked in. Fire and rescue have shown up by this point, and the whole complex is lit up with lights coming from emergency vehicles. We hear a small scuffle, and then the screen door of her apartment creak open. I look out of the peephole and see a man in handcuffs being led down the stairs, and then EMT coming up the stairs with a stretcher. A few minutes later, we hear her screen door creak open again, and I see EMTs carrying a stretcher with someone in it, and I open my door. Barb is unconscious and in bad shape. Her face and head are bloody and swelling. The exposed skin of her arms are already bruising. As I'm staring at her in the stretcher going down the stairs in disbelief, the same police officer that told me to get back inside and lock my doors walks out of Barb's apartment and asks if he can speak to my husband and I. I said yes and invite him inside. He proceeds to thank us for calling 911, and he tells us he has little doubt that we saved Barb's life. He asks what we heard, and I reiterate the whole story from beginning to end as he takes notes. He thanks us again and leaves. Barb calls me about a week later from hospital to thank me. I ask how she is, and she tells me that she has a fractured skull and bleeding on her brain, a broken cheekbone and jaw, broken ribs, and lots of bruising all over her body. But she feels lucky to be alive and thanks me again. She also tells me that the man is someone she's known for several years, that he'd showed up to the party right before she went home to her own apartment, and he was mad that she didn't want to sleep with him. Several months later, the ADA prosecuting the man calls me and asks me to tell her everything from that night. So I tell her from start to finish, too. She asks if I would be willing to testify in court, and I tell her whatever she needs to lock that animal up. A couple of weeks after that, I come home and have a summons on my door to be a witness in the case, but the court date listed has already passed. I call the ADA back and explain, both worried about how me not testifying hurt the case and putting him away, and also if I had a warrant out for my arrest for not showing. She tells me that the date was wrong, but that I am also not needed. I catch up with Barb a few weeks after that, and she tells me that my recorded call to 911 was used during court, and that the guy got 15 years in prison. I've taken thousands of calls over my career. Domestic disputes, heart attacks, car crashes, the whole spectrum of human panic and tragedy. You develop a kind of radar, an instinct for when something's off. Even if the caller sounds calm, you can feel it in the air. This one didn't start like a red flag call. It started like a lot of others, but it became the one I still can't forget. It was a Tuesday afternoon, around 2:30 p.m. Sunny, slow shift. We just finished running checks on local repeat callers. Nothing urgent on the board. Then my screen lit up. Unregistered cell call. The GPS tagged it from somewhere near the Western Industrial Park. Warehouses, fencing, train tracks. I picked up. 911, what's your emergency? There was a pause. Then a shaky girl's voice, young, maybe early teens. I don't know where I am. I sat upright. Okay, are you hurt? Are you in a building or outside? I asked. I think I got out. I don't know, I can't see any signs. There's train tracks. Okay, I said, already pulling satellite view on the GPS hit. What's your name? Another pause. Rachel. Her voice was quiet. She wasn't screaming or sobbing like some kids do. Just this worn out, almost empty tone. The kind of voice you hear after someone's been crying for hours and doesn't have anything left. I asked her how she got there. She said she didn't know, that she'd been in a room, locked in. Someone brought her food sometimes, but she never saw their face. How did you get out? I asked. I pushed the door. It wasn't locked anymore. She said. Can you describe the building? I proceeded. Gray walls, metal, no windows. That matched a dozen warehouses in that area. I marked 4 potential sites and sent officers out. As I talked to her, she kept whispering, like she was afraid to be heard. She said she thought the person might still be nearby, that she heard a van door slam after she ran. She was barefoot. She said she'd been in there for days, maybe longer. I asked about her clothes. She said she was wearing a hoodie that didn't belong to her, men's size, torn sleeve. There was something drawn on the inside of the pocket, a symbol she didn't understand, just a triangle with a line through it. That's when I started to feel it, that cold twist in my gut. I kept her talking while the officers closed in. They found the spot within 15 minutes, a disused lot with a storage building and 2 shipping containers. The doors on one of the containers were wide open. Inside, they found a mattress, chains bolted to the floor, used food containers, an empty bottle of Advil, and a single sneaker, children's size, but no Rachel. They swept the area, searched the lot, nearby roads, under train cars. Nothing. She was gone. I told the responding unit she had to be close. She was just on the line with me. She hadn't said she was running again. She said she was waiting. That's when I checked the call log again and noticed something that didn't make sense. The call duration was still counting, still active. But when I tried to speak to her again, I got silence. Not background noise, silence, like the line had been muted or cut. I asked the tech guy to trace the last cell tower the signal hit. His face went pale. It's not a tower, he said. It's a repeater, mobile, like a van. It dawned on both of us at the same time. She didn't call from a real phone. She called from a device inside a vehicle. Something mobile. Something that was moving while she was talking to us. That's when we pulled traffic cams from the industrial park, hoping to find the van. And we did. One camera caught it, barely. A white panel van leaving the area at 2:52 p.m., minutes after the call ended. No plates, no visible logos, just a dented side panel and a crack in the windshield. We tried tracking nearby cell towers again, looking for any device that pinged the same frequency. It came up cold. And the worst part, no missing persons report matched her description. Not in the city, not in the county. No Rachel, no girl with a torn hoodie, no triangle symbol. It's like she'd never existed. But I heard her. I kept the call log open as long as I could. I even recorded the last 30 seconds for myself. Against protocol, I know. Because if you listen closely, right before the line finally cuts out, just for a moment, maybe 2 seconds, you can hear something. Footsteps on gravel. A man's voice, distant. And then Rachel's voice, whispering, one last thing. He's back. To this day, that number never pinged a tower again. Back in 2013, I lived in Providence, Rhode Island, and had moved there for a new job. It was just me living there in a quaint and spacious townhouse with my then 4-year-old daughter. We were relatively new to the area and didn't know many people, but we did become familiar with the kind older gentleman who lived next door. His name was Ben. We lived in a connected townhouse with our 2 units abutting each other. Our street was lined with beautiful floral trees and was quite nice, but Providence is weird in that the conditions of the house and little neighborhoods can vary drastically street by street. We were near a few rough neighborhoods, but I felt relatively safe in my new home. I remember a few nights prior to this specific night, I saw a Facebook post with a safety tip to put your car keys next to your bedside table, so if anything ever happens, you can press the alarm and scare off an intruder. I've never been overly concerned about my safety and rarely took advantage of any tips I saw on Facebook, so I'm not sure how or why I suddenly decided to heed this advice. I was reading a book in bed with my light on in my second-floor bedroom, hours after putting my daughter to sleep, when I heard a loud sound outside. I peered out the window to take a look, and I saw nothing. I had taken some melatonin that evening, and I turned off the light and went to sleep. It was maybe a half-hour later or so when I was suddenly woken up by what felt like almost an earthquake. The room shook, and I heard a loud thud. Half awake, I gasped and sat up, wondering if it was my imagination or if I actually felt something, and I immediately ran to my daughter's room, thinking she had fallen off her bed or injured herself or something. As I swung her door wide open, there she was, sleeping soundly and sweetly. I was so confused. I heard another loud bang, and I had an eerie feeling that something was wrong, but I couldn't figure out what. I grabbed my car key fob and took it downstairs as I nervously inspected the first floor. I swore to myself, if I heard one more sound, I would press the alarm just in case, but I didn't. It was silent after that. I returned to bed and took a while to fall asleep again, but soon shut my eyes. The next day went on like any other day. When I noticed a friend of mine had repeatedly called me in the afternoon, I picked up my daughter from preschool and called my friend back. "Did you hear that?" he said. "No. What?" I answered. "News outlets were mobbing your street about an hour ago, and the news trucks were even in your driveway." I sat silent, confused. 3 men broke into your neighbor's place last night. They tied him up at gunpoint and stole thousands of dollars worth of items. They took off with his car. I immediately fell to my knees and began sobbing. I had heard it all happen. I almost pressed the button. But I didn't. I sobbed and felt completely unsafe. I asked a friend to come over for the night to stay with us, and it wasn't until the next day that I got a chance to speak with Ben. Ben explained the whole story and told me the cops wanted to talk to me so I could share what I'd heard and experienced. He said the men smashed the window in his basement and entered through there. That's the sound I heard before going to bed. Apparently, the timeline suggested that they saw my light and me peering out of the window, and they waited 30 minutes or so until my light was out to enter the premises. They didn't realize he was home, and since he had gone to bed early that night, it was suggested they cased his place beforehand. He had been asleep when one of them was rummaging through his stuff upstairs in his bedroom, which was directly on the other side of my closets through a shared wall. The sounds and shake I heard and felt were apparently the intruder knocking him down to the ground after realizing Ben was there and cupping his mouth to tell him that if he made another sound, he would kill him. This is why I never heard another sound as I was investigating thereafter. After they tied him up, he remained tied up for over 12 hours and eventually broke free before calling the police. I cried once again and apologized profusely to Ben, and I explained what I'd heard, and he simply said that as he was tied up, all he could think about was that he was glad that it didn't happen to me and my little girl. I really don't know what I would have done if my daughter and I had to experience that level of trauma firsthand. Ben seemed to be okay considering it all, but it took me so long to feel safe again and for the guilt to subside. They never caught the guys, and I ended up ordering a taser, which was illegal, and I got some mace, and even for the first time in my life, considered getting a gun, but I decided against it. I have been fortunate to never experience anything close to that again, and I certainly don't want to. I'm glad Ben was ultimately okay, but next time, I'll listen to my instinct. It's better to be safe than sorry.